Hello, Pitch Warriors, and welcome to tonight's Pitch Wars Live with some amazing middle grade mentors. You're in for a treat. We've been chatting for a while, and these people are super awesome. I cannot wait for them to take your questions, but enough about me, your host, Nikki. We're going to start with their introduction, starting with Ashley.
Hey guys! So I'm Ashley Martin, and I am represented by Marietta Zacher at the Galt Zacher Literary Agency, and I write fantasy and contemporary middle grade. And on my wish list this year is contemporary, fantasy, magical realism, and mystery.
Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute myself. I'm Cindy Baldwin. My debut novel, which is a middle grade magical realism novel, Where the Watermelons Grow, is coming out from HarperCollins next summer. And I write young adult and middle grade, usually either contemporary or historical with elements of magic. And I'm co-mentoring with Amanda Rossum-Hill, who's awesome. And we are looking for contemporary, historical, magical realism, and some sci-fi and fantasy.
I am E. Latimer. I am a literary intern as well as an author, and I write dark, kind of quirky fantasy, and that's mainly what I'll be looking for, as well as I'm a really big reader and writer of LGBT fiction, so that in middle grade is great too, so I'll be looking for that as well.
Hi, I am Gabby Byrne, and I write middle grade dark fantasy, and represented by Catherine Drayton at Inkwell Management. I'm getting over a cold, so I apologize for sounding like a frog that's been a little bit run over. I don't normally sound like that. And this year I'm looking for fantasy, upper middle grade fantasy, historical, whether that has elements of fantasy or not, mystery, and magical realism, and also steampunk.
Hi, I am Julia Noble, and I'm a teacher and a writing coach, and I'm represented by Melissa Edwards at Stone Song Literary, and my debut middle grade mystery is coming out in spring of 2019. And this year I am looking for mystery for sure, and then also contemporary fantasy, so it has to be set in our world, and magical realism.
I'm Julie Arts, and I am represented by the amazing Jenny Dunham of Dunham Lit. I write middle grade, contemporary, and fantasy, and I am co-mentoring this year with the wonderful Jessica Vitalis, who's joined us tonight on her magical unicorn. We are mainly looking for contemporary, fantasy, and anything with a sprinkle of magic, multicultural element, a retelling that's fresh and new, own voices, and strong parent-child relationship stories. So, thanks.
Miriam, are you with us? Shanna, how about you take this one?
All right, hi. I'm Shanna Rogers. I'm represented by Jim McCarthy at DG&B. I'm not going to try to pronounce all their names right now. And I write middle grade contemporary mostly, and I'm also looking for middle grade contemporary with, I like humor. I'll be looking for a mystery, some light fantasy, magical realism, anything along those lines, and I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sherry Schwartz, and I'm the author of Treasure at Lure Lake. I'm also a literary intern. I've been doing that for the last 2.5 years, and I'm looking for, normally I'm more interested in contemporary, realistic fantasy, but really anything as long as it's told well. I'm also going to be on the lookout for graphic novels and novels in verse and other novels told in other forms. And I'm very excited to be here tonight. Thank you.
And there you have it. These are, I mean, it's a great lineup. So I hope you have questions ready. And if you're wondering, how can I ask these amazing mentors questions? Go on to Twitter and just do #AskMentor. And the amazing Kate Foster is our Twitter captain tonight. And she'll be sending some questions. If we don't get to yours tonight, don't worry. Other mentors, including these, will go back on and try to answer them for you. Our first question of the night comes from Kirk Kraft. And it's kind of involved, so whoever feels like they have an answer they would like to share, feel free. I'm not sure how many people are second year plus mentors, and that's what this one's more for. What is your process for choosing a mentee, as in what factors go into it? Do you use a spreadsheet and compare subs? Who would like to talk process? Cindy.
So we did not use a spreadsheet. We are not that technologically savvy. Because Amanda and I are co-mentors, we both, we had a system where we both had veto rights to a submission, and then we would shelve it in different folders in our email depending on what we liked and what we wanted to request from. And then we just spent, we requested a lot of partials and then later a couple fulls, and we spent a lot of time texting each other about them. And at the end, we had it down to I think it was three manuscripts that we really liked all three of them. And so we read all of the fulls for those and took notes on those three fulls, and then kind of had it all ranked, and we were trying out for a wild card that would give us a second mentee because we were having such a hard time choosing. So we had like a complicated contingency plan for if this happens, then we'll do this. If this happens, then we'll do this. But it was relatively easy to narrow it down to a smaller number than the submissions we got, to probably between 5 and 10. Because there were a lot of partials that we requested that as we read further, the plot didn't really hold up, or there were just a lot of other issues. Or one thing that we saw a couple times was that a story would open in one way, in one setting, or with one premise, and then it would kind of shift into something else. And that wasn't as engaging to us. So once we had our main ones narrowed down, then we requested the fulls and read through them, made notes, and chatted a lot about which ones we liked the best, and ultimately felt the two that we ended up mentoring were the ones that we couldn't stop thinking about, basically. The ones that we just were like thinking about all the time and wanted to talk about and really wanted to see in the world.
I did not use a spreadsheet, but that's a really good idea. I just made detailed notes in a notebook as I read each entry, and I made note of the things I liked about it and the things that I was unsure about or questioning, potential weaknesses, which doesn't mean that those entries were not ones that I was interested in. I just needed to make note of, the pros and cons, basically. And it was fun to do that. It was fun to kind of really, make notes about even the topics and the different things that each entry was about. And I just recently went back and how many that I actually really loved and still kind of remember from that. So, but I'm going to think about that spreadsheet idea. That's a good idea too.
Anyone else want to tackle this question on what your process is while sifting through subs? Okay, so we have a request for a repeat question from last night, which is, what is your most favorite and least favorite trope? So we're gonna do this rapid fire style, just say it real quick with maybe half a sentence of why. And we're gonna start with Shanna. You're muted. You might have to unmute yourself.
Oh, there I am. Okay. Sorry. Most favorite trope, maybe mistaken identities, and least favorite, orphan parent or orphan child, no parents.
I have never thought about what my most favorite is, probably just as long as it's well done. My least favorite, I agree, like just kind of the orphan parent, or the parents are just dead and gone, or the parents who are just totally messed up. Unless it really serves the story, and it really has to be that way.
I honestly don't know if I have any. Like, I can't say off of the top of my head that I have something that I read that really drives me crazy or has me rolling my eyes. I think just about anything can be given a new spin. I think, I don't know, maybe the only thing I can think of that I think is hard to kind of give uniqueness to is the like prophecy in fantasy. I like there to be a little bit more than just a, well, this prophecy said so, so they're the chosen one. Like, I like there to be more to it than that.
So I don't know that I have actually thought that much about my favorite and least favorite middle grade tropes. But one thing that I really love in middle grade that I've seen more and more of in the last couple of years in the market is stories that are really based around friendships and kind of the good things and the bad things about friendships. Like, one of my favorite middle grade books is The Thing About Jellyfish. So kind of stories in that vein that deal with what happens when a friend is no longer your friend, and what does that look like, and what effect does that have on your life. Least favorite, I'm kind of with Ashley. I'm not a huge fan of chosen ones or characters who are overly special, as cruel as that sounds.
I'm going to be a little bit different here because I actually I kill off all my parents. That sounds really bad. I don't mind dead parents. I don't mind orphans. Some of my favorite stories have that as like the starting circumstances, Lemony Snicket, a series of unfortunate events, that sort of thing. But I will say one of my favorites is enemies to friends, or friends and enemies that have to team up. And then one of my least favorites is probably Mean Girls, but only if they're not done well. Give me a good Mean Girl and I will love her forever.
Yeah, this is hard for me too. It's not something I've thought about in this framework really at all. But I agree with Ashley on the prophecy, but only if it's a cop-out. If it feels like a cop-out and it's not a deep enough dive into the relationships and that's the case, that would bother me, I think. And something I really love, especially just recently, is the relationship between a kid and their grandparent. I've seen just recently some really good, I just finished, what is it called? A Year Down Yonder, which I loved. And it was all about the relationship between a girl and her grandmother. And that really spoke to me for some reason right now. So I'm going to go with that as my favorite at the moment.
I think for me, for a favorite, I really like just complicated relationships in general. So it could be between friends or with parents or with siblings, relationships that have some kind of complexity. I'm not sure if that's a trope, but I do like it. And least favorite, again, yeah, I'm not sure if this is a trope or not, but I'm not a big fan of overhearing really big things and that like kickstarts a story. I guess it's more of a literary device, I guess, than a trope. But yeah, it does feel like a bit of a cop-out.
So I'm going to say that in terms of tropes that I like anything that's been done a bunch that you take and turn it on its head. So if it's unexpected and fresh, then I'm all in. And so that can really be any of the ones that I would list as my least favorite, which would be like Ashley said, the the prophecy, like a sort of contrived prophecy, or the dead parents that get out of the way so that the middle grade character can have agency or whatever. If you can come up with a way to make that fresh and turn it on its head, then I'm going to be all in. But probably the only thing that I can't stand and really, really loathe is the like male hero saving the helpless princess. So like every fairy tale. But if you can take that and turn it on its head, a la Paper Bag Princess, I'm all in.
I love all of these so much. And actually, it just inspired me. So viewers, I'm sure some of you are aware of the hashtag Extra Mentor game. If you go ahead and hashtag Extra Mentor and tell me what your favorite or least favorite trope is, I will randomly pull one. And from the test show, I will pull that person today as well. So you could get 2 extra mentors if you play my game. And don't tell people the game, make them watch the show. And then they'll find out. See, okay, great. So next question comes from Christy McGill. What are some common weaknesses you see that are specific to middle grade? Who would like to take this first? Julia.
Okay, I think a common weakness that I see in middle grade has to do with the voice and not being close enough or having a lot of distance. And that's definitely related to point of view as well. I think that first, second, or third when you can work really well in middle grade, although second is of course super hard. But I think, excuse me. If that point of view is really distant, then it's going to be really hard to relate to the character. So yeah, I think having a voice that's too distant or a point of view that's too distant is a common problem.
Awesome. Anyone else would like to take this?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, oops. Okay, I'll go fast. So I feel like, and this is something that I saw more last year with our Pitch Wars subs, but it's present in the market too, that sometimes middle grade books can have a lack of depth from the character arc and from the character's emotional journey. And I think that that's always sad to me. It's always sad to me when I read a book and it falls flat because there's not enough emotional depth and emotional resonance. Because I think that those years when middle grade readers are reading middle grade books are so emotionally intense, and they're a time when things feel so huge and important. And it always feels kind of sad to me when books don't reflect that intensity.
I was going to jump in and say I see a lot of the same thing in my inbox as a literary intern, and like that can get really tiring, and I feel like sometimes it's a sign of people not maybe having read enough middle grade, but I very often see the same themes. Like bullies is something that is like constantly rehashed, and unless it's like a very unique spin on it or the writing and the voice is just there and beautiful, it can be something that I just get tired of. Also, one other quick thing is I see a lot of like age inappropriate things sometimes in middle grade. So like the character is experiencing something it's not necessarily appropriate for middle grade. So
I think, and I say this because it's something that I have to be careful of in my own books and that I've had to revise, is like characters kind of going off and doing something that it's not that it's necessarily a badly written scene or anything like that. It's just not necessary to the plot. Like it doesn't further the plot. Like characters kind of tend to go wandering and do something, you know, that again can be entertaining and fun, but when you really look at it, it's not contributing to the plot. It's not moving the story forward. It's just kind of a fun little tangent on the side. Yeah.
Awesome. Now this one's for everyone. I'm very excited to hear your answers. As a mentor, what are your strengths and or what do you hope to work on with your mentee? And this comes from melpend77. And we're going to start with Gabby because I love your smile. Just remember to unmute yourself.
There. Yes, now I've got it. Okay, so the question was, what are my strengths as a mentor?
Yes,
right?
What are your strengths and what do you hope to work on with your mentee?
Okay. I think I have quite a lot of strength in world building, especially, but I'm quite editorial. I will go through and do a big concept edit first and then a second edit later. And my mentor or my mentee can also expect homework from me. And that might look like certain books that I think they should to look for certain things, to read that critically for a particular strength that I want to help them move into their manuscript more. So, yeah.
I think for me, my strengths and the things that I would be most likely to be working on are voice and point of view, and the emotional core of the story, and really adding a lot of depth to it. Yeah, I think those are really those are the big things for me.
Well, one of the things that I'm really excited about with Jessica and I mentoring together is that Jessica is awesome with plot. I mean, look at her. She rides a unicorn. So she is going to be your amazing plot person, and I am the person that is obsessed with character arc. So I'm going to be deep diving into the character arc, how that character arc supports the structure of your story, and also what kinds of imagery and motifs you can use to reinforce that character arc. And I didn't weigh in on kind of my pet peeve for the thing that I see all the time in my inbox, but I do work as a book coach, and emotional telling is what I see all the time. So I will help you not do that. And I'll help you not do it in the exposition of your work, but also in the dialogue, because that's something else that I see a lot in middle grade.
Am I next? All right. Am I on? Okay, sorry. I feel like I have both sides of the fence as having been a mentee and a mentor. So just overall, the Pitch Wars experience from different sides of it. As far as your manuscript, I feel like I'm pretty good with story structure and making sure everything hangs together really well, and just overall balance of making sure that the character arc goes along with the plot arc and everything kind of hangs well together. I'm also pretty strong with query letters, so that's something else that I can help with. And yeah, so.
I think my strengths are I'm very, very, very picky. And so from the start to the finish, I will definitely be able to nitpick as much as you may want or may not want me to. Also, I feel really comfortable with story structure and also the emotional arc of how those two things fit together, the plot and the emotional plot, if you will, that goes along with that and drives that. So, and then also I think, and probably everybody here is really good at the emotional part for you as a mentee, of going through this process, of going through the publishing process, and just having somebody to be a cheerleader for you and be there for you along the way, from the moment we pick you until your book is published. So I think I'm assuming I can speak for everybody in that respect, that even though we're working on your manuscripts, we're also here for you in other ways. So.
So I'd say my strengths are pace, kind of along with what I was talking about, like finding the scenes that maybe aren't necessary, or tightening up scenes, making things progress at a good pace in the story. I really like chapter endings. That's something that I really look at in my own writing, like finding that perfect spot to end, to really entice your reader to turn the page and then start the next one, and not give them an excuse to like put a bookmark in and put it down. And then another thing I think is like consistency in your character, like moments where it's like, well, what I know of your character so far in this book, I don't think they'd say that, or I don't think they'd respond to that situation in this way. And really like that emotional level from the characters, like how are they emotionally reacting in this scene? How can you really show that more from their reaction, like how are they reacting to things emotionally?
So I mentioned before that I co-mentor with Amanda Rossen-Hill, and we have really similar strengths and also complementary strengths that one of us does better than the other. But we're both really, really good with emotion. We both write really emotional books, and we're good at dealing with difficult topics and difficult emotions and making them rich and resonant in your story, and kind of character arcs in general. Amanda honestly has taught me more than any writer alive about theme and incorporating theme into your novel in a deeply emotionally resonant way. We also are we're both extroverts, and we're both really kind of emotional people, and we are really supportive, and we still keep in touch with our mentees from last year frequently and check in on how they're doing and talk them through different insecurities and read their manuscripts and stuff. So I feel like we're pretty good at that aspect of it as well.
As far as strengths go, I think one of my favorite things is really strong characters, really emotional, kind of like amazing character arcs. So I would definitely be concentrating on that. I also really love line editing. So I will probably definitely be diving into that, and just literally on a line by line basis. And I'm really looking forward to working really closely with someone. So if you don't want someone who's all up in your business, I'm not your best mentor, because I like having Google chats or Skype chats, whichever works for you. And and because revisions can be super overwhelming. So breaking that down with you and going through that step by step with you is what I'm looking forward to doing.
Man, I want you all to mentor me. You guys all sound fantastic, which I mean, I already knew that because you guys are awesome. Our next question comes from Sarah Says, right? Where do you draw the line between middle grade and upper middle grade in terms of the age of the main character? Who would like to take this one? Erin.
My crazy hand waving. I got excited because my middle grade that's coming out in 2018 is very weird, like age range. It actually just says 10 and up on all of the websites, and that's upper middle grade. So but yeah, I would say for lower middle grade, probably like 8 to 12 is my kind of around there. And then, yeah, so for my upper middle grades, literally just 10 and up, but I would say 10 to 14 or 15 for upper middle grade.
Awesome. Anyone else want to mention their opinion on this, or is that a pretty general? Go for it.
I was just going to add that there's a little bit of a difference between the age range of who's going to read it and the age range of the character in the actual book, because kids tend to read up. So for that 10 plus age range, the characters, if the readers are 10 plus, the characters are probably going to be 12 plus is kind of my experience. So a 12-year-old and up characters, upper middle grade, 11, 10, even every once in a while I see a 9-year-old, but not that often, lower middle grade.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And then this one's from Charles, at Charles Femia. I apologize if I'm butchering anyone's name. How can we get across to the mentors that our MS fits something specific in their wish list if it doesn't necessarily show up in the first chapter? Who would like to take that one? Go for it, Julia.
I think if it doesn't show up in the first chapter, it should show up in the query. If there's something that you really want to make sure that we know and that we need to know in order to make our choice about whether we're going to ask for more pages or whether we're going to select you as mentee, then definitely it should be in the query. And if it's that important to the story, it should be in the query anyways.
Which, speaking of queries, let's take a moment to talk about revealing secrets in queries, because I know some people are like, oh, I need to entice them, I can't reveal X, Y, and Z. What are your thoughts on how much information should you give in a query? Shanna.
The worst thing is to be vague. You don't want to give away the ending, but do give enough specific details about your story that you couldn't be describing every other story out there. Like somebody goes on an adventure and bad things happen and they have to do this, or everything will be ruined. Definitely add the things that make your book unique, something about the character that is different, specifically what kind of journey they're on, and specifically what's at stake for them.
Erin.
Yeah, just basically repeating that too, but like the stakes are what's so important to me in a query letter. If I'm reading, I need to know exactly what the character's up against and what horrible thing is going to happen if they don't, get the goal that they're striving for. And, because vague stakes are the worst when it's like, oh, or horrible things will happen. And you're like, okay, well, what things? So specific stakes.
Beautiful. Anyone? Oh, Cindy, go ahead.
So this is not a perfect method because there's different conventions to each of these, but what always helped me the most when I was querying is to think about it like the flap copy on the inside flap of a hardcover book. That when you pick up a book at the bookstore and you read what it's about, that's about what you want your query to be. So you want it to say, enough about the story and enough about, like Erin said, the stakes and what's going on that you want to keep reading without necessarily either erring too far on the side of just vague and general or revealing the ending.
Awesome. Okay, so we are a little over halfway with the show, so it's time to be like, hey guys, do you all have Writer's Life apparel Pitchwares mugs? Because they're like super cool, everyone. You should go get them. I love mine, and I love my shirt. And you know what? Every the proceeds we get from those sales goes toward making Pitchwares just an even more awesome community and tool for you guys. I don't know if you've noticed, but we've added some pretty cool things this year, like webinars, and some other things may be coming. So, make sure you check it out and get some cool swag. And let's be honest, you don't have to necessarily be a mentor or a mentee to enjoy and support Pitchwares, because we are all Pitchwares. Anyway, that was my commercial break. So thank you to our viewers. I've noticed some more people have been jumping on. If you have any questions, make sure you go on to #AskMentor and shoot them our way. And our awesome Twitter captain, Kate Foster, is feeding them to me. And we just got one from @LitDanAck. I'm sorry again. How do you plan to have fun with your mentee to keep their spirits high? I love this question. But I'm going to say, raise your hand if you want to answer it. Ashley.
I think, and it varies to mentee. Not everybody is always big on social media, but I happen to love Twitter and GIFs on Twitter and team names. And I think all of that is super fun. And also, encouraging check-ins and you know, just all that fun jazz on the hashtag. But I will say now, I love Twitter and I love GIFs. So I'm crossing my fingers that the manuscript I fall in love with, that its author does too.
Julie, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sorry, it was just taking me a second to unmute. So Jess and I like to have a lot of fun, as you might have guessed, and everything that we do, we're critique partners and friends in real life too. So I think that we're really looking for a third person to add to that fun dynamic that we already have. And I think we'll be doing a lot of check-ins on Twitter, but also on email. I know sometimes it's intimidating when you're first joining writing Twitter to feel like an outsider or like you don't belong or whatever, and maybe you're a little afraid, or people going to get your jokes. And then after a while you realize that you can just put it all out there and that it's a wonderful community. But we'll be reaching out in, I think, multiple ways to try to have fun. And revision is hard work, but it also is such an exhilarating feeling to have it pay off and for things to start to click into place. So we'll be helping to make that happen, I think.
I'm going to second Ashley here on the GIFs thing. I'm big on Twitter. I love finding the most ridiculous GIFs there are, if I'm saying it right. As well as, like I said before, I love Skyping or Google Chat, and like sometimes you just don't even need to talk about writing. You can just like, it's just stress relief sometimes. It's sort of like having virtual coffee with them. And also team names. I'm super into team names for when there's more than one of me when I get my mentee. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks guys. Anyone else? Oh, Sherry, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everybody here, except that GIFs make me dizzy, so I'm not so good with those. But everything else is great. And I would also say that depending on the author or the mentee that I choose, you know, if it's somebody who's really not comfortable with social media or Skyping or whatever, that, you know, we can find the way that works for you. You know, if you prefer to talk on the phone, or if you prefer texting or whatever it is. But yeah, we definitely need to find some fun in the midst of all the hard work.
Totally. I'm not gonna lie, me and my mentee last year, we only communicated on Twitter via Taylor Swift gifts. So, and we were Team Swift. I don't remember how that happened, but that's what happened. So Kate Foster has a question for you all. Why middle grade? What makes middle grade so special? And we're all going to answer this one, starting with Cindy.
So that's funny that you started with me, because I actually, before I wrote middle grade, I always wrote young adult, and my debut book was my first middle grade. But before I started writing middle grade, and when I was writing young adult, I actually read a lot of middle grade, and I used to be a middle grade book reviewer. And I have always loved I feel like middle grade is really unique in that it's such a transitional time, and I have always loved the stories and the emotions of kind of moving from childhood into, you know, teenagehood and adulthood, that you can really tell big stories and you can really deal with big things. And I love when authors are able to deal with big, hard topics in a gentle and a hopeful way. And I think that that's something that middle grade does exceptionally well. And that's why I write it. And that's also why I really enjoy mentoring it.
I'm going to second Cindy here, because I am the same way. I started with YA, and I kind of accidentally almost fell into middle grade. Strange and Deadly Portraits was actually supposed to be YA when I started writing it. And I realized as I was writing it, okay, this voice is super not YA. It's middle grade. So I just went with it. But that's what I love about middle grade, is the voice in particular, like that Lemony Snicket, Ellen Potter, Roald Dahl kind of quirkiness is what is like my absolute favorite. Like if you can hit that sweet spot, I will fight for your manuscript. Like I love that voice. So
Okay, I'm going to jump in and just say I really love the fact that a lot of middle graders are finding their power. You know, they're just beginning to become aware of themselves in the world and just beginning to understand, exert power in relationship with other people, whether that's their friends or adults in their lives, or even, you know, their changing view of themselves. And just that sort of power dynamic that's happening in this age group, I think is so rich. And I just love it. And I also just want to add something about the query question, because I've been thinking about it ever since. And that's that, you know, I think small details can give you so much a sense of your voice too. So those really specific details, even though there's not a lot of room for many of them, but just one or two real specifics, especially if they are a little bit on the quirkier side, I think can really feel a lot of very rich with your voice, and that can be really compelling.
Okay, well, I love middle grade because of the creativity in it. There's still so much license for imagination in middle grade, but there also is a lot of room for dealing with really serious issues, and there's just this amazing balance between those two. And also, I used to give literacy workshops, and I would always ask the room what was the first book that really impacted you. And like 7 or 8 times out of 10, it was a middle grade book. Like this is the time when for a lot of people, reading is really starting to have a bigger, profound impact on their lives. And I find it amazing that middle grade can do that.
Julie.
I'm having unmute problems. Sorry.
It's cool.
So I always thought that I was going to write adult, and I did write adult. I have some very bad emo poems and trunk novels. And then I went to work in a bookshop, and they put me in charge of the children's section. And I was like, no, I read literary. Why are you putting me in the children's section? And I started reading middle grade when I was in my late 20s, and I just fell in love with it all over again. And I put aside all of those really bad adult novels that I was reading and started writing middle grade. And I think the other thing that is a big part of that is that my kids are middle grade age right now, and so are Jessica's. And so we're just immersed in that great voice right now. I've got a 6th grader and a 7th grader, and so I'm living it every second, every time I turn around. And as my kids like to tell me, I actually have the sense of humor and a maturity level of about an 11-year-old boy. So I think it works for me, and I'm probably going to stick with it.
So kind of like Julie was saying, I feel like part of me is still 12 at heart. And so middle grade was something I was just drawn to naturally. That was the first thing I ever wrote. And I've had a hard time ever breaking out of that because I just love the voice. I love the characters. I love reading. And I loved reading, especially during that time in my life. I would bring a book to the dinner table, and I just couldn't get enough. And so I want to create that experience for other readers. I also think that middle graders have a great sense of humor. They really appreciate things that are funny. And since I like to incorporate humor in my books, it's just one of those things where the voice and everything, it just all fits together.
Yeah, I was also going to say, if I'm being honest, I'm stuck at about 12 or 13, and I'm a little boy inside. There's this like 12-year-old boy inside of me, but I also have 4 boys, and one is definitely YA now, but the others are middle grade, and it's just been fun to rediscover that with them. But it also going back to what Gabby was saying, I just think it's such a powerful time in life, these ages of 8 to 12, 13, 14, when kids are just really discovering so much about the world, about themselves, about what's right, what's wrong to them. And I feel like I just remember diving into those books at those ages and finding myself in the pages. And yeah, so now just wanting to give that back to kids. So.
I'd say kind of a combo of everybody's answers. Like, I've been a bookworm since I could read. So like so much of my childhood memories is the books that I was reading. And, you know, I kind of skipped YA as a reader. Like, I remember as a kid, the YA section in our library was like tiny. So I read middle grade, you know, until I was like 13 and then skipped right to adult. So like middle grade was just such a huge portion of my life. And I just, going back to what Cindy said, I love that, you know, you have humor and you have heart and you can have it all in one book. And, you know, I have a middle grader at home too, and just seeing her excitement over discovering these books and, you know, laughing and reading me lines and crying and just like, I love that you have that whole gamut of emotions and that kids get to experience that and hopefully learn something from it or at least feel something and feel connected to it.
That's awesome. And on a side note, you know, an agent told me recently that if you could rewrite any story as a middle grade, it would sell really, really well. So, hey, viewers, you picked a great age category to be interested in. And as you can see, these wildly successful people are really awesome. You touched on humor, Ashley. That goes into our next question from Thaddeus Spinst 1. How important do you rank humor for a middle grade manuscript? Would anyone like to take that one in particular? Ooh, that's a lot of people. I did not see who's first. Shanna.
Okay, I like books that are funny. If your middle grade novel is not funny, that's fine. You shouldn't try to force something that's not there. If it's a deeper topic or if it's a mystery or something like that. But I would say even those things, even darker stories, even more emotional stories, should have elements of humor here or there. It doesn't have to be that the main character, the main voice is humorous all the time. But something to lighten things up for the reader now and then. But you can't force it. It's one of those things that you just have to try to find the funny.
Sorry, I know a lot of people want to take this one, but your hands went so fast. So who would like to go next? Ashley.
So I agree. Like if funny isn't your voice, like don't force it. I've read a lot of books that hang on the serious side and love them, but I do love humor. Like if you can make me laugh out loud while I'm reading, or, you know, I have to stop and read a line to my husband because it cracked me up and he's giving me weird looks, you know? And I think my favorite books personally are the ones that have both the humor and the heart. One of my favorite books is The Meaning of Maggie, and it deals with the heavy topic of having an ill parent. Her dad has MS. She's dealing with that, and at the same time, like it's hilarious. She's like a tiny Leslie Knope, and when she's excited, like it's written in all caps. Like there's all these elements of humor to it that kind of give you that break from the heaviness. So I really love that in a book, when it can do both, like really give me strong emotional feelings, even make me cry, but also have those moments of humor that kind of give you that emotional break to laugh and find that hope in that heavy situation.
Yeah, I don't think I have too much to add to that, but just that even if you have a heavy topic, there can be humor, and actually probably should be humor, and the humor allows the reader sometimes to reflect and in a different way on what is going on, even if it is a heavier topic.
So Amanda and I joked for a long time that between our two books that are our debut novels, there was like 1.5 jokes between the two books. So we're kind of on the other side. Humor is not a make it or break it thing for us. And I would say that as important as humor to me is lightness, that there are scenes that have a lighter emotional profile than the heavy scenes in your book. That said, I love when a book does make me laugh. Like some other mentors have said also, I love when a book is able to have a lot of heart and a lot of depth and even some heavy topics and also be funny. One of our mentees' books from last year, which is actually getting released in 2019, is about a really grumpy parrot, and it's hilarious because of who this character is and what his view is on the world, but it's also super literary and it deals with really heavy, difficult topics, and it does it in a beautifully emotionally resonant way. But so that's our 2 cents as the mentors who aren't always very funny, and it's okay if you want to.
Mine's going to be a little bit different. I love dark humor. Often the darker the better. Of course, you have to walk that line between middle grade, what's acceptable and what's not. But kind of like that dry humor, that dark humor. And it's not necessarily slapstick or like necessarily even a character being funny. It can be just like a turn of phrase. And again, that comes very much with that voice that I was talking about with Aurora Dell or Ellen Potter. Like Lemony Snicket has that sense of humor through the whole story. And it's a dark, like Lemony Snicket, it's a dark series if you think about it, but it's also makes me laugh through the whole thing. So.
Awesome.
I gotta hop on.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Nikki, I gotta hop on because I absolutely, that rang true with me, Erin, and I can see you and I are gonna have words about the words. So yeah, I love that dark, sharp humor, and just to say that there's as many different kinds of humor as there are different kinds of books. So I think it's important, as Cindy pointed out, to sort of make sure that there's lightness, especially after really heavy scenes, but it doesn't have to be slipping on a banana peel or, and it doesn't have to be wit either. There's lots of different varieties of humor.
I really like that. Words about the words. As you saw this, guys, right here tonight, we're putting the war into pitch wars. I mean, it gets heated up in here. Okay, so we're coming up on the hour. I will repeat what the extra mentor game was at the end, but I'm going to ask the last question, which comes from GC Beckman, and that is, what was your favorite middle grade book from your childhood and why? And we're all going to answer this, and if we could leave it to like just one sentence, that'd be great. And we're going to start with Ashley.
I think Alice in Wonderland, just because I loved how weird it was and how many layers there were to it, and just the adventure of it. And I loved classic literature, so.
Goodness, I had all my thoughts rushed out of my head as that question got asked, because actually a lot of my favorite middle grade books are ones that I read as an adult. But I would say my favorite as a kid was probably Anne of Green Gables. And she is always a character that I've related extremely to, and I love to see myself in that book, and I read it over and over as a kid.
It's so hard to just choose one. I'm probably going to say The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. That was just such a beautifully written book. Like, so many of the characters had so much depth, and it was so creepy, and I loved it. So.
Okay, I am definitely dating myself here, but that's okay. My absolute favorite growing up was A Wizard of Earthsea, Ursula K. Le Guin. First book about Earthsea, and the idea of names having power was so me so strongly, and I started collecting names after that, and I have still a list of probably close to 100 pages of names as a result of that book.
For me, my favorite books middle grade books when I was growing up were definitely the Babysitter's Club books. I mean, there's lots of adventure and fun, but also lots of serious issues that came up. But through all of that, it always came back to the friendships, to the relationships, and I loved that.
So I was that kid that read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe so many times that the pages fell apart, and I tried to go into every closet of every house I was ever in trying to get to Narnia. And I mean, like, literally, I remember being definitely over elementary school age and moving into a new house and being like, yes, there's another closet I could try to get to Narnia. And when I was maybe slightly too old to still be doing that. So I think that is definitely a book that shaped me as a child and captured my imagination and made me want to write fantasy.
For me, it was more of a character. I was an early reader, and when I read books about Ramona Quimby by Beverly Cleary, I just loved her. I loved everything about her. That really launched me into all of the reading I did from there.
I'm also going to say The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, partly because I read it as a child and loved it, but then I've read it to my boys at different ages. As an adult, I've read it to them as they've, when they were 5, when my oldest was 5, and then a few years later, I read it again, and I've probably read it 3 or 4 times now to them as an adult, and every time I read it, I feel like I get just another layer of significance in that book, and it's like really kind of helped shed some light on how I read it as a child too. So it's been cool.
And I'm going to answer this one too, just because I love middle grade. Mine was The Giver. It was the first book that really made me question anything, to the point where my mom almost wouldn't let me finish it. Because I was like, Mom, do you really love me? She's like, what are you reading? Of course I love you. Anyway, so we actually finished with a couple minutes to spare. So I'll ask one question, but it's just a quick question. Which mentors likes action in middle grade? So if you do, just go like wild in your little square and people can see, oh, look, so many wild little squares. We all love action. Okay, well, thank you all so much for being on tonight, and thank you for watching. And as your reward, I will repeat with the Extra Mentor game, which if you're not familiar with Extra Mentor, people who support Pitch Wars like you donate and say, hey, give this away to a random person, and I come up with a little game. And sometimes they're on Twitter, and sometimes they're here, because this is my space. So the game was tweet #ExtraMentor and say what your favorite and least favorite trope was, or one or the others if it doesn't fit. And I will pull that tonight. Get your submissions in by 11 p.m. and I will try to pull that sometime soon after. Thank you again for being on. If your question was not answered, feel free to tweet these amazing people and use the #AskMentor throughout the week. Tomorrow we'll have Adult and New Adult, and thank you all for being here. You are awesome, and I want you all to mentor me like immediately, because I'm just in awe of all of you. Anyway, have a good night, and may the pitch be with you, everyone.